Okay, so the next thing I'd like to talk with everyone about is we talked about how we were running the test cases, and sometimes if the test case runs against the code that you wrote, you might get some errors back. And that leads us to a situation where we might want to do some debugging. And if you haven't heard the term debugging before, when we run our project, it starts, runs everything in the project, and then finishes. When we have debugging mode on, it similarly starts everything up, but we can put specific breakpoints in our code to tell the program to stop at those breakpoints so we can evaluate what's going on at that point in time in that program. And that can be helpful to us when we go in and we look at the test and we see we're doing the comparison and it's just not clear to us, or maybe the stack trace, which is the information that comes back from the test, is telling us something that we just don't understand. So we might want to take a deeper look into what's happening at the program at different important parts of the processing. So in order to do that, so I'm going to do a little bit of an example of one here, and then we'll let you guys bring up a program that you've worked on, and we'll let you set some debug points in there. But to get started with the example here, I have a file here that's running. And we can see some of the things that we talked about this morning. I'm creating some integer variables, and then I'm creating a message, and then I'm going to go ahead and print some things out. I'm actually going to print out those variable values and do some processing down there, and also print out a sum. Nothing that we haven't talked about before, some of the things that we talked about this morning. Now, if I was to do this as a homework assignment and I ran my test cases, or if I run the program and it fails, like I say, I may want to go in and take a look at the program more closely, line by line. So if I actually run the program now, we'll see that at the top there's the run. And it starts, and then it tells us that the process finished, okay? But now if I want to do this again and I want to take a look at what's happening in the processing, I might go in here, and on the left side of my column here on the editor, I have the option of just single clicking, and you'll see the orange dots come up, which will tell us that I'm putting a breakpoint there. That's where I'm going to want the program to stop. So I'm coming through here, setting some breakpoints. I'm just setting these random. And then I'm going to come up here, and this time I'm going to click the debug mode. So we'll see the program start similarly, and it stops with the highlighted line. Okay? So when it stopped, there's a couple of additional windows down here that you can see at the bottom. And down here you can see that that's some information down here, like this variable A is equal to 1. So we actually set that equal to 1, and now we're able to confirm that the line above, we actually set A to equal 1. Now I've stopped here, and I want to find out what's going to happen after this next line runs. So I need to come down here, and I have some choices. If I put my cursor on here, this tells me I can step over the line, which will bring it to the next line. Sometimes the step over, step into, and those things can get a little bit confusing. But what I would suggest that you look at for right now is you can use any one of these here, like this next one is step into. That means it's going to stay in the program and it's going to go to the next line. So if I click that, notice it stops at the int C line, even though there's no breakpoint there. Okay, and also notice that once it executed that next line, down here at the bottom, I now have the B value is equal to 45, which is what we expect. I also have those values showing here in a shaded gray text, which also is a quick look, so you don't have to go digging into there to find anything in the debug window. Now, on the left-hand side, you can experiment a little bit with the step over, the step into, and then on the next one is a step out. These are F8 would be the shortcut. And then the last one is the F9. So the two that I would recommend that you try out the most to begin with are this one here, which is F7, which is step into, and that will go line by line. If I wanted to instead go to my next breakpoint, I could use the one a little bit farther over on the right-hand side, which is this last option, which is the F9 option. And if I run that, now it's going to skip down to my breakpoint. That again becomes very important when your programs get large, because you don't want to be stepping into code that's going to lead you into other code that you don't even want to evaluate. Sometimes you might want to do that, but oftentimes you won't. So be understanding that the F7 here, which is going to be this indicator here, and this far one on the right will actually take you to the next breakpoint. Between those two, those I think will give you enough to get used to how to process through these files. Okay? And notice I skipped all the way down to line number 9, which now gives me visibility into what's going on with int A, B, and C. The values are there. The values are also up in the right with the gray shaded text. So very easy to debug and see what's going on. And this becomes very important because you're running the test, it's failing, you can't understand why, and sometimes you aren't going to understand why until you get deep in the weeds, so to speak, to really see what those values are. Because if int C equals to 352, that's pretty straightforward. We can expect that's going to work with no problem. But what if populating int C had to do with calling 3 different functions and 3 different methods and everything coming back and all of those things working? If that was the case, you would be able to actually set breakpoints in those methods and start jumping for each step along the way. Because remember, Java programs are small classes that do specific things working together. So right now, again, none of this might seem all that important, but it will once we get into inheritance and all of the object-oriented situations that are going to cause us to start here and then jump over to another file, another file, another file, another file, and then come back here. So you can imagine what int C, right now it's very simple. I don't really need the debugger, but with all of those jumps, I want to see what happens when it comes back. And if it turns out it's not what I'm expecting it to be, now I need to expand my debugging situation. In other words, I need to go to that next class, and in order where I might be doing that is if I wanted to do a jump into another class, all I would have to do is that situation where I hold down the command or the control, hover my mouse over it, jump into that next class, and set some breakpoints in there. And now, instead of jumping from breakpoint here to breakpoint here in this file, it'll go to this breakpoint and then jump into the next class because I've set a breakpoint in there. What I want you to understand is that this basically runs from top to bottom, right? This is our main. These are being executed line by line. But that doesn't mean like an old style program where it's only line by line. It jumps out and comes back. It jumps out and comes back. Not this program, but the ones that we're going to be writing in the near future. So it's good to get familiar with this. One other thing I want to show you here is on the left-hand side here, you see this orange circle with a ring around it. Almost looks like Saturn, I guess, if you will. If you go ahead and click on that, you're going to see all of your breakpoints turn to white circles. Okay? And the white circles basically allow you to keep your breakpoints where you want them to be, but it will not hit, the breakpoints will not stop the code. So at this point, I've gone in and said every breakpoint that I have set, turn it off basically, and then this green arrow down at the bottom says run the program all the way through. It will run and it will end. Okay, and then now that you've quickly completed out of it because you want to jump back, just go ahead to just click the same orange circle with the ring around it, the on-off button will turn those debugs back on. Another thing I'd like to point out is that when you're running through the debugger and you get finished with the program, did you notice in this debug window down here, there's nothing there. So it's when we ran the program before, it would either run and succeed with the exit value of 0, or it would run and you would possibly receive an error back, right? So what we've done here is there's two windows down here. There's the debugger and there's also the console. So if you click on the console window here, it's going to give you the same output that you would expect to see in the run window. Okay? Because once it runs all the way through, you're going to want to see what the expected result is, and that's how you can get to it. So toggle back and forth between console and debugger. If you wanted to stay in the console mode and run this again in debug mode, sorry, it jumps over to debugger. But what we can do here now is we can continue to step through this code. Okay, and we're stepping through, but we're viewing the console. So now when we go through some of these system outputs, we can start to see what's writing to the console now, line by line, because these lines are being executed, and because they're outputs that go to the console, we can now see those as they're running through. So there's all kinds of different ways that people like to use the debug tool. I just want you to know that it's available, and next time you run a test case on one of your katas and it doesn't work, my suggestion is to go back to the main class that where you wrote your code in the kata and set some breakpoints, and it'll be a good opportunity to help you see if the debugger can help you determine what the error is. And the beauty of it is that when it comes to the debugger, it works the same for a small program as it does for a large program. It's just a matter of if you're going to jump from your small main class over to a bunch of other classes and set those debugs. But it's not like you have to learn different debugging for different style or size projects. It's just the same tool, and you can use it in so many different ways that you will find the way that you like to use it the best.